Hello, everyone. My name is Despina Sourias, and I am the CEO of Enough, a spin-off B Corp of the Waste Not, Want Not student initiatives that started at Concordia University in 2016. Now, do leaf blowers drive you as crazy as they do me? A few weeks ago, the council of the CDN-NDG, Montreal's most populous borough, unanimously passed a bylaw completely banning let me put the bylaws text on the screen. Completely banning the two-stroke gas-powered leaf blowers and severely restricting the times when the other kinds can be used. I encourage you to share your thoughts and on that question in the comments. Today, I have the privilege to chat with the two champions of this new bylaws. Despina Sourias is a city council representing Loyola, who championed this new bylaw on the borough's council. Despina has over 18 years of experience in organizations working with youth, women, and immigrant population, and is particularly involved in initiatives that promote Montreal's diversity. Elizabeth Robinson is a retired doctor specializing in family medicine and public health. Elizabeth is a member of the Coalition for Green and Quiet Neighborhoods, whose aim is to ban gas-powered leaf blowers on the island of Montreal and beyond. And I'm grateful that she invited me to join the coalition when it was coming together about 2 years ago. Thank you, Elizabeth, for that. Now, we were supposed to be joined today by Catherine Lund, but unfortunately, she has been feeling unwell today and was forced to bow up. But Catherine is a climate activist and has been working for the past few years to reach out to citizens and members at all levels of government to promote concrete actions to fight climate change. As such, she sits on Montreal West Environment Action Committee and La Voix Verte, another citizen group that has been advocating for this ban. Both the Coalition Quiet and La Voix Verte are citizen groups who have been advocating for the CDN-NDG borough, the ban gas-powered leaf blowers. And you can see a picture on the screen here with many of the awesome folks involved in both groups, which we took during the council meeting this bylaw was passed. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Let me just find my questions here. Now, Elizabeth, according to the stat from Environment Canada, using gas-powered leaf blowers for 1 hour emits as much pollutants as a car driving 1,800 kilometers from Toronto to Halifax. Now, what do these pollutants from gas engines do to the health of the workers that regularly use leaf blowers and residents of the people living around it?
Okay, well, I'm going to try and explain this, and I hope you won't find this too technical, but the pollutants we're talking about in this diagram or in this graphic are the pollutants that cause smog. And most of these come from the combination of the combustion of fuels such as gasoline, diesel oil, and fuel oil, and which are coming from all kinds of engines, cars, trucks, trains, industries, off-road engines. Of course, some pollutants causing smog come from natural sources. They can come from wood stoves and from forest fires. What exactly are these pollutants that cause smog? The main ones are tiny particles of soot and other particles suspended in the air, very tiny, and also harmful gases such as nitrogen oxides and carbon monoxide. Now, the reason why gas-powered leaf blowers emit more pollution than cars is that they have a type of engine called a two-stroke engine, whereas cars, trucks, and motorcycles, at least in the developed world, it's very different in China and India, have four-stroke engines. Two-stroke engines are used because they're cheaper and lighter than four-stroke, but they're a lot dirtier. And that's because they burn a mixture of gas and oil, gasoline and oil, and some of that fuel isn't burned, but it's spewed out in a vaporized form. So in addition to the particles and the nitrogen oxides, you have these volatile organic compounds like benzene, which is carcinogenic. Vehicle engines have really been improved over the years, and I'm sure you've all heard of the term catalytic converter. These are required in cars now, and they trap a lot of the pollutants. So that at this point, a professor in the School of Population and Public Health at UBC, Dr. Michael Brower, estimates that estimates that lawn equipment contributes 10 to 20% of overall smog-causing pollution, which may be a surprise to most of you. So now if we want to get into the health effects, these pollutants in the form of particles, the very small ones are called PM 2.5, which stands for particulate matter smaller than 2.5 microns. 2.5 microns. And that's way smaller than the diameter of human hair.
Yeah.
So when you breathe these tiny particles, they go right down into your lungs. Some of them can even get into your bloodstream. They can make asthma worse. They can cause lung cancer. They can cause heart and lung disease. And they cause premature deaths. And hundreds of studies have been carried out all over the world, including in Canada, which look at the yearly average PM 2.5 level in a city, and then they look at the level of heart and lung disease and death rates, and the higher the particle level, the higher the death rates. And this is true even in Canadian cities, which are much less polluted than in some other parts of the world. So the evidence is pretty solid there. And then there's the noise issue, because gas-powered leaf blowers are certainly loud enough to cause deafness and high blood pressure over time. And while most workers are going to be wearing ear protection, the effectiveness of ear protection is questionable, and audiologists will tell you this. The other thing about noise from gas-powered leaf blowers is that compared with electric leaf blowers, they emit high levels of low-frequency sound waves, which carry for long distances. And that's why you can hear them, not just next door, but on the next street and even a couple of blocks away. So that's about it. And just one last thing is that, of course, leaf blowers emit greenhouse gases. They emit a lot of CO2, like all engines, and those contribute to climate change, which is very preoccupying to me now as a retired doctor, and I'm very concerned for my granddaughter and for all children due to climate change.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I my day job is that I make nanoparticles for a living, nano and microparticles for a living, and then essentially I use a flame process, so combustion as well. And every time I have to use this equipment to make those nanoparticles, I actually have to wear masks, an N95 mask. I've been doing this for many, many years before COVID started, which is really, I think, where many people got introduced to masks. And, listening to you now with all the microparticles that are being emitted with those small, dirtier engines relative to cars, I always think that, people working with those, leaf blowers and lawnmowers should be wearing those kind of masks as well, because
definitely
what you're emitting and people living near these areas. Despina, first, congratulations on the CDN-NDG adopting a complete ban on the use of two-stroke gas-powered leaf blowers, and thank you for your leadership championing this bylaw and getting it past the finish line. Now, people like me and Elizabeth who are involved in environmental advocacy always, feel that, governments move too slowly sometimes, and it's a bit frustrating. But, I can't help but notice that this bylaw passed within 7 months, only 7 months of you being elected in. And I'm wondering if you can speak a little bit about how did you manage to get this done, and why is this ban is important to you?
Well, I want to start by thanking, don't thank me, thank all La Voix Verte, thank the Coalition of Green and Quiet Neighborhoods, because to be honest, I mean, this was a longstanding issue in the borough that has been brought up to the borough. Citizens have been mobilizing for quite some time. It's not a new thing. So I have to thank the citizens that have mobilized really themselves, and then came and had the courage to speak to us and sit with us and raise awareness about both the environmental issues, but also obviously the noise pollution, which is what we could really work around in terms of regulation. So I have to say that it's really the citizens that mobilized. During my door-to-door, it was an issue that was that people had discussed with me at their doors. There's different noise issues that come up, nuisances that come up in the neighborhood, but this was one of them that came up more than once. So it had already sparked something, in my mind, speaking to the groups, and they took the time to speak to all of the borough councilors. But I do have to thank them for mobilizing and bringing it to the forefront. But because there was already that kind of buy-in, the community buy-in, it was easier to move it forward. So projects, when they have that buy-in, it helps. Secondly, a lot of information was brought to our attention, including both environmental and noise pollution factors. There was examples from other cities and boroughs. There was already bylaws that exist in other boroughs within the city. So that was also easy. It was good to have at hand, to have like these constructive discussions with our services to see how we could put this forth. So that, and also I have to thank our mayor, Katawa, because she's the executive branch of the council, who moved it forward with the services and really believed that we could do something about this quickly. We're a new administration, and we want to show that we do care about the ecological transition, but also we really want to create neighborhoods that are nice to live in. And this is one way we could do it. We're talking about leaf blowers, or, there are nuisance, high noise pollution. I learned a lot about the frequencies, also how they penetrate through, a lot of cement and all these things. So I think that was really something that we had something to work with. We had groups to work with, and we were able to move it forward together. So for me, this is, I'm going to send the thank you back to the citizens who mobilized and helped us move it forward.
Thank you, Despina. I think I listening to you, I think about what Greta Thunberg often says, that every election is a climate election, and I think it's always important for citizens to mobilize and make sure that these environmental issues are prioritized, because people have 100 different problems or 100 different things that you want to address, and it's often falls on citizens to prioritize different issues. So
it's to help us guide, to help us navigate priorities a little bit too. It's the role, right? So
exactly. I wanted to follow up. So since we announced this fireside yesterday, I received quite a few different comments on how the borough will ensure compliance and enforcement of the bylaw, and I'm also personally interested in how will be enforced for institutions. For example, I was very happy that Mayor Gracia responded to my question on Twitter, and let me put that tweet here, confirming that that ban will actually apply to Concordia's Loyola campus. And Concordia is my alma mater, where I've done 3 degrees, spending 12 years there. I actually have no idea what kind of leaf blowers Concordia uses, but can you talk about how the ban will be enforced on both individual households and organizations who have relatively larger green spaces?
The bylaw itself, to be enforced, usually the borough has inspectors to enforce the bylaws, right? So they have to catch people in the action of doing it to enforce it and give a warning and fine. Usually that's how it works. So, but the bylaw itself for us is really a communication tool, right? It's there to raise awareness about the issue. Why are leaf blowers a nuisance? So that's one thing, and to disincentivize it too, because there are fines that are related to the use of if it's outside the times that it could be used, and also if you're using certain kinds of leaf blowers, like we mentioned, the 2-stroke gas leaf blowers are the ones that are completely banned. The other ones are regulated, so in terms of when and how you could use them. So for us, it's really like telling businesses and citizens about it, and institutions in this case too. So where everything is going to be on our website, so both in English and French. The bylaw will be is going to be fully translated as well. Equipping the teams, training the inspectors, first to raise awareness for them to know the bylaw itself, because you need to know the bylaw. So that's an important, this is the beginning of it. We're implementing it as we speak, right? We passed it a month ago. So it takes a bit of time to get everybody raise awareness within the teams, equipping the teams to do it as well, to understand how they have to enact on it. So that's one thing. There's the campaign, there's going to be a fall campaign as well, because that's when people are using leaf blowers again, because the leaves are falling. So awareness raising campaign online, and other means as well are going to be used to get the word out. And obviously it does take a little bit of time, like I said. So this is like the first year we're running through it the first year. Like we've seen other bylaws, so it does take a little bit of time to see the full effect. Like we were comparing it to like the animal permit bylaw, where you need to have like a permit. Before it was like 1 in 10 people that had a permit, now 1 in 3 has a permit. So it does take a little bit of time to get it going. Not everybody's aware of it. A lot of people read about it in the Gazette. I got questions, some not happy about it, some like super enthusiastic, sending me, yes, my neighbor, or not my neighbor, it's usually they had seen a landscaper use it, and they're like, what do we do? So people are, they're becoming more and more aware of it, but we're working closely with the teams to ensure that it's being both the teams know what to do with it, but also the citizens and businesses and institutions like Concordia are also, getting the hang of this is happening. And
wonderful. Thank you, Despina. Elizabeth, is there a few other boroughs that have implemented restrictions or complete bans on gas-powered leaf blowers, including Ville-Marie, where you live? I'm wondering, how does it work in Ville-Marie, and can you highlight some of your favorite examples of other bylaws that other boroughs can look to when considering adopting their own bylaws?
Okay, well, Ville-Marie published or passed its bylaw in 2019 in the fall, but they didn't do any publicity about it. And in fact, I never even knew about it until this group, the coalition, formed, and most of the participants were in NDG, and they wanted to get a bylaw in NDG. And I said, well, I'll just ask and try and find out what's happening in my own borough. And I was very surprised to learn there actually was a bylaw that had been passed. It's available in French only online, and there hadn't been a lot of publicity around it, which may be understandable because, with COVID starting in spring of 2020. So in my neighborhood, we have done things like meeting with our borough councilor and going to borough council meetings and asking questions about how they were planning to publicize it and how they were planning to enforce it. We've mentioned it, my neighbors and I, we've mentioned it to landscapers in our neighborhood and to our neighbors, and we passed out about 100 copies of a leaflet in the streets immediately around where we live. Of course, one problem is enforcement, as Despina mentioned. The inspector actually has to see the person using the leaf blower at the time that's not allowed and the kind that's not allowed in order to issue a fine. We can't take a video of it and send it to the borough website. That won't work. So it's an ongoing challenge, and I think it will take time, as Despina mentioned. And in terms of other bylaws, I kind of like the one that St. Lambert adopted, which outlaws all gas-powered leaf blowers, not just the two-stroke ones, because 4-stroke engine leaf blowers do exist. They're not used very much. They're heavier. They're not all that common. And they're less polluting than the two-stroke ones, but they're still more polluting than cars and trucks. And I saw a table on that in an article as I was preparing for this broadcast. And the other thing in St. Lambert, they announced the ban a year ahead of when it would actually take effect. So that gave landscapers and property owners a chance to get used to the idea of the change.
Am I correct in assuming that the electric leaf blowers are also less polluting than the 4-stroke gas?
Electric leaf blowers don't pollute at all. I mean, but they do damage the soil, and they're bad for pollinators breeding in leaves. So we'd like to promote the use of gentle raking, less raking, leave some leaves on the ground. Now that's a sort of ecological concern rather than a human health concern, but the planet is our life support system, and we have to make the planet as healthy as possible in addition to making human beings as healthy as possible.
And in the first Fireside we organized on leaf blower, we had Professor Emma DeBlanc from Concordia and Camry Gomery from who who led the coalition, and we talked a lot about the biodiversity of lawns and how the best practice is to not blow the leaves at all, just leave them there as a compost and they return the nutrients back to the soil. Now, if you absolutely must, from an emissions point of view and pollution point of view, electrical is a lot better than gas. Despina, obviously one of the goals of today's Fireside, at least from my point of view, is to inspire other boroughs to follow CDN-NDG boroughs' lead and implement similar bans. And I was very happy to see this article of quoting Westmont's Mayor Christina Smith sharing plans that they're going to put a ban on leaf blowers by the fall, modeled after the bylaws of the CDN-NDG and as well as Ville Marie, who I understand are also neighbors of Westmont. I always thought that if enough boroughs ban the use of gas-powered leaf blowers, a case can be made to ban their sale, which would be, in my mind at least, would be much easier to enforce, given that's an ongoing challenge. But maybe there's a faster ways in going through, each borough one by one. And I'm wondering if you see any roadblocks preventing the overarching Montreal government from adopting a citywide ban instead of doing this one borough at a time.
I'd say, well, first, I think borough by borough is not a bad idea either, right? Because you're creating awareness, you're creating like you saw our bylaw inspires Westmount to reinforce, actually, because they already have a bylaw, not permitting the use of leaf blowers in the summer, for the summer months. So, I think it's not a bad, it's like a movement, right? So some things are good like that. Of course, boroughs and cities basically regulate around nuisances. So the environmental stuff is a little bit harder for us because we don't necessarily have jurisdictions over that. So, that's why we're banning it, when and what kinds could be used based on what we have as our jurisdictions and what we can do legally speaking. So I think, well, there's two things for if you want to look at overarching, you could go, there's provincial level and federal level work that could be done. We saw, I think you showed something earlier on that was something that was put forth by the federal government. So I know there's an interest in environmentally, bringing forth environmentally conscious practices, and even I think in terms of our consumption to kind of gear us towards that. So I think there's something to be done at that level. Otherwise, and then we spoke with the two groups that we spoke with were to talk to the Communauté Métropolitaine de Montréal. So it's the CMM, and they actually have they could regulate around atmospheric emissions, which is I think one of the main issues around the leaf blowers. I think when we're talking about the general movement that exists across North America right now, it's around that. So the CMM is a body that regulates that, and that the CMM really, it brings together all the municipalities and cities in the greater Montreal area. So I mean, that's something that we discussed with you guys as well. I think that's an angle if you want an overarching regulating around that. But I think it's all levels of government have to kind of work together when we really want something like this. But I think borough by borough is a good way to go, because again, you're getting we're seeing what's happening in other boroughs. It inspires us what we could do. Best practices are exchanged. I think it could be done. You could work on both levels, to move it forward. It's always good to work with them.
Yeah, I think there's always value on grassroots work as well as combined with top-down kind of movement as well, and in both directions. So it's definitely agree there. So Elizabeth, I'd like to move to what comes next, and you talked about the health impacts of gas engines. And leaf blowers are not the only widely used equipment that have these engines. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what other equipments do you see with these that use these harmful engines to be currently commonly used within our neighborhoods?
Well, I think that obviously there are gas-powered lawnmowers and also weed whackers that a lot of people have and use. And really, there's no reason not to get an electric lawnmower.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I've never heard anyone complain about an electric lawnmower, but I'm not a landscaper either. That's what I do.
it is also similar stat from Environment Canada about lawnmowers. My screen is too small now. It's similar to you use a 1 hour of use for lawnmowers to be equivalent to for emitting as much pollution as driving for 80 kilometers from Quebec City to Ottawa. I think with lawnmowers is 1800, so we started with a more important one, but it similarly has like a disproportional level of emission as well. Okay, I see this is a question from Cassie. Let me put it on the screen. She's asking if there are what are the specific procedures that citizens can use to report infractions?
So basically, because I am reading the question as it is, citizens can call 311 or take a picture and send it to 311. What I think Kathy's bringing up, will the inspectors come in a timely manner? That's always the issue, right? Will they come? I mean, you could do it. What we're trying to do at least is, okay, we're getting this information. Could we raise awareness? Could go and see the citizen that is using it, or in this case might be landscapers a lot too, because they use it to do work that's maybe not leaf blowing itself with leaf blowers, we know that, but could you at least warn them about it? So that's something that we're looking to do, at least. Like, could we warn them, let them know, yes, we got this information? Because you can't ask a citizen to, in terms of like, they cannot be the ones enforcing it, right? So I mean, that's something that we could do, like at least they could inform us, and looking at how we could do the warning afterwards. Also raise awareness. Some people don't know about the bylaw, so it's, if citizens want, they could tell their neighbors when they see it happening. But it's a very pertinent question. I did have citizens that sent me actually a video about that, and they did send it to 311, and nothing happened. But that's the idea. If you have it, send it over. We're getting information right now. We're seeing how it's going on the ground. But it's a very good point, Matt. So like I said, right, mention the bylaw, and if you do send it to 311. And what we're trying to do is at least raise awareness and get the warning out.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things that came up in my discussion about this is that leaf blowers move from one borough to another. So as more boroughs, they don't really recognize the borders between the boroughs. Like one landscaper mowing lawns or blowing leaves in one neighborhood, they're gonna go to the next neighborhood and do that.
They might not. And there's that. And sometimes, like I had a contractor, like a landscaper. Well, actually, they're not landscapers; they're doing something else, but they do use leaf blowers. Right away, they asked me, like, what do we do? So some people actually really follow this, and some people don't. So there's like a two-way communication that has to happen there.
Now, my last question, Despina, you're just at the beginning of the mandate, and once again, congratulations on championing such an important step early on. What's next for CDN-NDG on the environment? Obviously, one thing that came up today is extending this kind of ban on gas engines to lawnmowers, other equipment that have similar engines and similar issues. I don't want to put you on the spot there, so I'm not asking for the benefit.
I got an email this week about the lawnmowers, to be honest. But I mean, for us, like, we're doing an overhaul of our nuisance bylaw. So in that regard, we're going to be looking at different nuisances, including those of this kinds of products. So it's Magda Popeano, who is our councilor in CDN, it's going to be like really doing the overhaul so that it could be coherent and consistent on how we treat such matters. And nuisances, yes, there's noise pollution, but there's other things as well. So it's really like an overhaul. It's going to take a little bit of time to move it forward, because there's going to be research done. Again, like, we're looking at what we can and cannot do jurisdiction-wise. So that's something that we're looking forward to move forward on. In terms of, I'm very proud to be part of an environmentally conscious administration, both locally and at city center. So, I mean, locally, we recently passed our surplus budget, and we are going to be hiring somebody to work on the ecological transition and social justice, to kind of always have that lens in the work that we do within the borough, which is something that we hope will bring practices and actions that are that are aligned with, ecological transition and social justice in the work that we do. And in terms of the products, you're talking about CO2 emissions, specifically lawnmowers. When we're thinking about that, that's something, again, like it's not so much something that we could regulate on, but we're looking at other things that we could do. Like we're talking, for me, it's like, planting more trees. And we just passed a contract to increase the size of the lots that we use for trees on the street, so that we could plant trees that could last longer, so like long living trees. Reserving bus lanes to increase access to increase, I would say, like accessibility and the efficiency of our public transport system. So we've reserved lanes on Sherbrooke Street and Queen Mary. These are the kinds of actions that we're putting forth, continuing to work with groups to raise awareness, environment. We have eco-quartiers and, working with our groups locally to move forward on that. Other things, well, these are overall some actions, but for us, like, we are committed to, working on environmental issues during our mandate. And I'm I'm happy to have been able to, be part of this movement at this time,
Yes. So I sorry, I've been Elizabeth has a question that she wants to ask, but I wanted to just mention this comment from Deanne. Evidently, some landscapers are bypassing some of the rules, using their lawnmowers as a leaf blower, and I think it's one of those issues that transcend different engines. And as I understand, you're looking at overhauling the entire noise bylaw to expand it, and so this will probably. Hopefully.
That's what who use their law. Okay, yeah, I see.
Okay, so Elizabeth, do you want to ask your question?
Okay.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
You want me to ask my question now?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, what about that last one?
Go ahead.
I'll
go to it after. It's okay.
Okay. Well, my question was, do landscapers or lawn maintenance companies or individuals need to have a permit in order to work in NDG? I'm asking that because I thought I saw mention of it in a Westmount newspaper, where a certain person got a fine for using a leaf blower out of season and also for not having a permit. So I wondered if there is that kind of system.
I mean, a permit to work specifically in CDN-NDG? I don't think so. I mean, because they're hired to work with, by individuals, right? They hire landscapers for their lawns.
Yes, yeah.
I don't think so, but I'm not sure. I can't guarantee that, but I could get back to you. I'll write back in the group afterwards. I'll write to you directly, Elizabeth. Yeah, okay. But it's a good question.
Thank you, Despina, and I sorry about my little abruptness earlier. I got too preoccupied. I saw there's also other comments about different ways of some people try to bypass different these kind of regulations. So obviously Deanne was talking a bit earlier about how landscapers can use the lawnmowers as leaf blowers, and now there's this comments about running a generator to power electric leaf blowers. How do you sort of take into account all the different ways? I mean, I've never been in a legislative body, but I'm imagining this is a very common problem with anything trying to legislate.
And there's very specific, and then there's like one-by-one cases, if for emergency situations, you might need a leaf blower.
Right.
So, you might, and then in this case, it's like, well, you're just enhancing the noise. Right. So we learned from this, right? And there's amendments that could be made. There could be, that's how things evolve, right? It's put in place. We did what we could with the knowledge that we had, and now we're going to be learning and, perfecting the bylaw and its enforcement with time, because you're going to see different situations, and in different boroughs and there's probably different situations, as well, that you might find. Yeah.
And I think it speaks a lot to your point about raising awareness and having the general citizenship sort of understand why the reasons behind these kind of bylaws and the implications behind it, because then these kind of actions that maybe trying to are in compliance with the letter of the bylaw, they're obviously not following the spirit of it, and so the people hiring those landscapers can sort of
No, yeah.
Sure. Okay, so I love this conversation, and I'm always have the unenviable task of doing closing remarks and wrapping things up, which I really don't want to do. I just wanted. I feel like a proper way of concluding this today's fireside is reading 2 points that Catherine emailed a few hours ago that she wanted to make had she been able to join us, and I think they're perfect sauce to have to leave in people's minds as we wrap the conversation up. The first one is why is this all done piecemeals? Once several boroughs go through the process, there should be some sort of a process where others can adopt the same bylaw more easily. Shouldn't require so much effort. From ordinary citizen. And then the second is more importantly, as came up in this conversation a few times about jurisdictions, the province need to give municipalities more means of countering climate change. Bylaws which allows to protect green spaces, farmlands, curb certain emissions, change zoning, implement public transport, expropriate land, reduce the sale of single-use items, etc. Noise bylaws in and of themselves will not cover all of that that you need to do in the next few years, and within the looking at the broad range of the climate crisis and broad scope of the climate crisis, and it has to be simplified and enshrined in law. So municipalities, including Montreal, need to ask the provincial government for those rights, which I think is a timely conversation to have as we approach the provincial elections. On that note, I would like to salute both of you, Despina and Elizabeth, and everyone in Coalition Quiet and La Voix Verte, for their environmental leadership you're showing by championing this bylaw. Obviously, the hard work continues so that we make the changes that are vital to fighting the climate crisis across Montreal, Canada, and the world. And I wish you all have a lovely evening and a restful summer. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It was a really nice, interesting conversation, and I hear all the comments as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you too. Thank you, Carol, for organizing these chats.
Appreciate it.